Quick one. Last video hit over 100 comments, which is absolutely mind-blowing for this channel. Let's try that again for this video. Comment down what you think about these stories, or just a hello, and the team will reply. We always reply to the comments. As always, please like and subscribe and help this channel grow. Thank you. I consider myself a savvy eBay seller, but I learned the hard way that scammers are out there looking for unsuspecting targets. It happened about a year ago when I listed a gorgeous 14K gold necklace designed by a well-known jewelry designer. I had purchased the necklace years earlier directly from the designer's studio for over $2,000. It was a statement piece with the designer's hallmark stamped onto several custom gold components. There were engraved florets and delicate dangling charms made to look like cascading leaves and flowers. The chain was a beautiful Rolo style in warm yellow gold. I spent what felt like an exorbitant amount at the time, but I just had to have that necklace. It felt like a work of art that I would treasure forever. After wearing the necklace only a handful of times over the years, I decided it was time to part with it and list it on eBay. I suspected I could get a decent price since the designer had increased in popularity. I styled the necklace for the photos, making sure to capture all the beautiful details. The listing described the designer name, the 14K gold purity marking, the grams of gold, and every dimension down to the mem. I noted the weighty feel and superb craftsmanship that went into making such a special piece. My asking price was $1,500, which I felt was fair based on similar statement necklaces from the designer selling on eBay and vintage sites for upwards of $2,000. I was pleased when an eager buyer messaged me right away after I listed it. She said she had been looking for this exact necklace for a while and asked if I would consider her best offer of $1,200. It had only been listed for a day with minimal views, so I agreed since the piece hadn't generated much interest yet. We quickly completed the sale at the lower price. I packaged the necklace extremely carefully, wrapped securely in bubble wrap, and placed inside a decorative gift box. I also added insurance and signature confirmation for the package to be safe. The box looked lovely when I shipped it out, just as described in my listing. Exactly a week after mark is delivered, I received a terse message from the buyer claiming the necklace I had sent was a cheap imposter. She included some blurry photos of a necklace that looked almost identical to the one I sold from a distance. But up close, the quality was clearly inferior with missing designer hallmarks and flimsy construction. I was shocked and immediately responded asking the buyer to send my original necklace back upon receipt so I could issue a full refund. My mind raced wondering if the package had been intercepted or if the buyer was attempting to scam me. Instead of working with me, the buyer immediately opened a fraud case against me through eBay, insisting I had tried to scam her by selling a fake. I was panicked, unsure how I could prove the necklace I sent was authentic when she still had possession of it. Despite my protests, eBay sided with the buyer. They sent me a label to refund her money in full and advised me to be more careful when listing designer items in the future. I felt sick knowing this meant I was out both the money and my cherished necklace. When the package arrived back over a week later, my heart sank realizing what had happened. The box contained a plastic novelty necklace on a silver-toned chain that vaguely resembled the original from a distance. But up close, it was clearly a cheap duplicate lacking the weight, quality, and all of the designer's hallmarks that were present on my original piece. This buyer had pulled a classic bait and switched by returning a fake duplicate while keeping my authentic necklace for herself. I urgently appealed the case multiple times, including a copy of the original receipt from the designer, detailed photos highlighting the custom hallmarks, and even a 10-page typewritten letter pleading my case. But eBay would not reconsider their decision. They maintained that without the original item in my possession, I had no definitive proof the necklace sent back was not the one I had sold. I was absolutely livid at the blatant scam, but felt utterly powerless. At $1,200 and my most treasured necklace stolen, I was left devastated. Then, almost a year later, I happened to stumble across a new listing that looked shockingly similar while browsing eBay. My eyes widened in disbelief as I zoomed in on the photos. It was the exact same necklace I had sold a year prior, I was 100% certain. The unmistakable designer hallmarks were clearly visible, identical to my original piece. Even the backdrop and angles were similar, as if the seller had used some of the original photos I had taken. The icing on the cake was their audacity in listing it for $2,500, more than double what I had originally sold it for. I immediately tried reporting the listing to eBay, but they maintained they could not remove it without definitive proof this was my original stolen necklace. Frustratingly, all my photos and records from the old case had been deleted. I desperately scoured my computer files and email history trying to find anything to conclusively identify this as the same piece. The designer receipt, original listing photos, anything. But I had no concrete evidence, just an unshakable pit in my stomach that I was right. In the end, I could only sit back and watch in horror as another unsuspecting buyer purchased that $2,500 necklace, undoubtedly believing it was a deal. The callous scammer who had stolen from me was now profiting twice over off my loss, while eBay looked the other way. It was the ultimate slap in the face and a painful lesson about how quickly things can go wrong on online marketplaces, even when a seller follows all the rules. Now I am much more cautious about selling high-end designer pieces online. I learned the hard way that slick scammers know how to take advantage of honest sellers, and eBay will nearly always side with a complaining buyer. All I can do now is be far more selective about selling online and fastidiously document every purchase and sale. I photograph packages before shipping, scan receipts into digital copies, and take abundant photos of any valuable items from every angle. While I cannot get back my cherished necklace lost to an outright scam, at least now I can better protect myself. Still, I shudder imagining that crook gleefully reselling my stolen necklace online and deceiving another buyer. The experience left a bitter taste in my mouth along with a tough lesson about online marketplace fraud. I've always been obsessed with gadgets and electronics. Ever since I was a kid, I loved taking things apart to see how they worked. Old radios, VCRs, anything I could get my hands on would be disassembled and strewn across my bedroom floor. As I got older, my interests expanded beyond just electronics and to computing. I became fascinated with vintage computers and gaming systems. I started collecting all sorts of obscure, outdated tech that most people considered junk. The older and more arcane, the better. My room looked like an episode of Hoarders, stacked to the ceiling with piles of wiring and circuit boards. But to me, it was a treasure trove, a glimpse into the early days of consumer technology. My hobby consumed countless hours and most of my expendable income. I would scour flea markets and estate sales, looking for diamond in the rough electronics to add to my collection. I frequented online auction sites daily, bidding on vintage lots and rare finds. Most of my purchases were hits, but occasionally I would buy a dud that didn't work as expected. It was all part of the thrill, taking a chance on some mysterious device, not knowing if it was functional or worthless junk. One day, while perusing an online auction site, a listing immediately caught my attention. It was for an extremely rare computer from the early 80s called the Radio 101. This machine was revolutionary for its time, but only a few hundred units were ever produced before the company went under. Just seeing a photo of the retro badge computer and boxy monochrome display gave me intense nostalgia. I had to have it for my collection. The listing contained very little information about the item's condition or origins. The seller simply stated it was new in box, and the photos showed what looked to be pristine, untouched equipment in original packaging. I usually wouldn't gamble on such a vague listing, but the prospect of scoring this unobtainable piece of vintage tech clouded my judgment. A bidding frenzy ensued between myself and other enthusiasts vying for the Radio 101. I put in my maximum bid, hoping it would be enough to secure the elusive prize. To my delight, I won the auction. The computer would soon be in my possession. I could barely contain my excitement as I awaited the delivery, imagining all ways I would showcase this retro treasure. A week later, an unassuming brown box arrived at my doorstep. I anxiously carried it upstairs to my electronics lab, carefully cutting open the tape. As I removed the contents, I was amazed to see the Radio 101 looked even more pristine than it did in photos. The beige casing had no signs of wear, the keyboard looked untouched, and the packing materials were immaculate. It appeared to truly be new in box. I spent the next several days completely enthralled with the vintage computer. After blowing dust out of the vents, I plugged it in, flipped the toggle switch on the side, and heard the satisfying chime of the system booting up. The machine worked flawlessly. I was transported back in time using the primitive text-based interface. I explored every menu, tested out the applications, and took volumes of notes on specifications and capabilities. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. Owning this long-discontinued relic was a dream come true. About a week after the Radio 101 arrived, I started developing peculiar symptoms. I would get intense headaches and nausea, which would come and go at random times. I assumed it was eye strain from staring at the low-quality display for too many hours. But soon the headaches became more frequent, sometimes accompanied by dizziness. No matter how much rest I got, I constantly felt run down and fatigued. Figuring it was a simple virus, I ignored the symptoms and kept using the vintage computer. I was too enthralled to be concerned. After a few more days, I began noticing an odd smell coming from the device whenever it was powered on. The other vintage electronics in my lab all had a musty odor, so this wasn't totally abnormal. But the Radio 101 had a harsh metallic scent, like electrical fire. I started realizing that my headaches consistently flared up when sitting in front of the computer screen for longer than 20 minutes. One night, while researching online, I came across a decades-old news article about the Radio 101. It stated that the computer had been hastily recalled after launch because of a radiation defect. The cathode ray tube display leaked dangerous levels of radiation that could cause severe health side effects with prolonged exposure. I sat there in shock reading the reports. Had I exposed myself to toxic radiation from this vintage machine? My hands trembled as I packed up the computer and clung to the idea that this was just paranoia. But deep down I knew this thing was hazardous. The seller had neglected to mention they were peddling a defective, recalled device. I had even been running it constantly in a small room. I packed the system away in a lead-lined trunk in my basement to contain the radiation and immediately booked an appointment to get medically tested. For months, I was a nervous wreck, racked with health anxiety over the ramifications of my radiation exposure. Every ache or pain left me wondering if it was the first signs of cancer or tumors. My obsession with medical tests and scanning my own body bordered on hypochondria. I joined forums seeking others who had vintage electronics radiation exposure, hungry for their experiences and outcomes. Most assured me that the damage was unlikely severe from a single incident, but their comforting words did little to quell my lingering fears. That intense week of enchantment and discovery now felt like a distant, bittersweet memory overshadowed by lasting trauma. I had achieved my dream of owning the mythical Radio 101, only to have it turn into a nightmare. Though my symptoms faded and medical tests eventually came back normal, I was left with deep uncertainty and distrust of my own health. I gave up collecting vintage computers altogether, no longer feeling the same passion for those relics. Though I had avoided catastrophic harm, the thought of what could have been still haunts me. I exposed myself to the cruel irony of technology. The pioneers who invented these wondrous machines were also unknowingly creating instruments of health destruction. My retrocomputing passion nearly became my undoing. As a lifelong comic book enthusiast, I've accumulated an extensive collection of rare and valuable issues over the years. My prized possession is a pristine copy of Action Comics #1, featuring the first appearance of Superman back in 1938. I spent countless hours as a teen scouring dusty boxes at conventions to achieve my dream of owning that holy grail issue. Though I'm now an adult with a family and career, I still get that same thrill of the hunt whenever I browse late-night listings on eBay, hoping to score an amazing deal on key comics for my collection. So one evening, during one of my regular eBay treasure hunts, I just about fell out of my chair when I stumbled upon a buy it now listing for what appeared to be an original copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15. This was the legendary 1962 issue that introduced Spider-Man to the world. Near mint copies have sold at auction for over $1 million, so the $300 asking price seemed impossibly good to be true. Some rational part of my brain flashed a warning that it had to be a counterfeit knockoff. But the obsessive collector in me, the excited kid who used to bike to the corner store for new comics every week, couldn't resist snatching up the offering before anyone else. The package couldn't arrive fast enough, the days crawling by as I compulsively checked the tracking info countless times. When it finally landed on my doorstep, I tore open the box with trembling anticipation. The comic inside did appear flawless at first glance, the colors vibrant, pages crisp and unmarred. It looked perfect, though I knew appearances could be deceiving. I immediately took it to Mike, the grizzled old owner of my local comic shop, who had decades of experience spotting forgeries. As Mike slowly inspected the book, I knew from the furrow in his brow that the news wouldn't be good. With a deep sigh, Mike gestured out the subtle giveaways. The paper stock was too bright, the artwork sloppy in places, the colors just slightly off. Though the fake was masterfully produced, it didn't withstand Mike's expert scrutiny. My heart sank instantly. Dreams of owning a Holy Grail issue dashed in an instant. I was more disappointed than angry at first, wanting to believe the seller had been fooled too and wasn't intentionally scamming me. Nonetheless, $300 was $300, so I reached out politely requesting a refund or return. The response I received was immediate and scathing. The seller angrily accused me of slandering him over a perfectly legitimate book, insisting it was an authentic original printing. When I provided Mike's assessment detailing the flaws proving it a counterfeit, the seller became enraged. A barrage of harassing and threatening messages followed, accusing me of trying to extort him and vowing I'd regret making trouble for him. Most disturbingly, he seemed to know my name and home address, personal details I had been careful never to include on eBay. The intensity of the response shook me, so I swiftly reported the seller to eBay. Within a day, I received confirmation that his account had been permanently deleted due to a long history of selling counterfeit collectibles. Relieved that eBay had my back, I figured that would be the end of a crazy debacle I hoped to put behind me. However, I soon discovered the situation was more sinister than I realized. A couple weeks later, I hesitantly opened my mailbox to find a strange package addressed directly to me. No return address or postage, clearly hand-delivered. Inside was a stack of gruesome crime scene photos and a threatening note demanding I withdraw my claims against the seller. Shaken, I pored over the photos looking for clues, but couldn't glean anything definite. Over the next few weeks, more parcels began arriving containing increasingly frightening contents and vulgar demands. Bloody weapons, disturbing Polaroids, menacing notes promising to make me pay. Terrified now for my family's safety, I installed security cameras around the property and requested police patrols in my neighborhood. The harassment tapered off after about a month, though the culprit was never identified. The police explained that counterfeit collectibles rackets were often tied to organized crime rings who viewed reputation attacks as justification for violence. I counted myself fortunate to avoid becoming another crime scene photo like the ones that had been sent my way as warnings. In hindsight, I realized that one seemingly innocent eBay purchase brought me to the dangerous attention of criminal elements I hadn't realized still lingered in the collectibles trade. Whoever was behind the threats demonstrated they could track me down in real life, likely via shipping labels from past eBay transactions. And they had resources to produce extremely high-quality forgeries, meaning much more sophisticated than just a lone counterfeiter. I became much more cautious conducting my hobby online after that. Collecting was my lifelong passion, so I refused to abandon the hunt out of fear. However, the run-in was a sobering reminder that you never truly know who's on the other end of an online interaction. I now meticulously document all my purchases in case issues arise and avoid engaging directly if I suspect a forgery. That terrifying ordeal left me wiser, if a bit more wary. Though it pained the eager young fan in me, I now understood that unbelievable bargains often have a dark side. Moving forward, I resolved to be more selective and shrewd in pursuing my comic book passion, heeding hard lessons on the risks of blind enthusiasm. Above all, I emerged with a renewed appreciation for the honest sellers who make collecting such a vibrant community. I should have known something was off the moment the antique wardrobe arrived at our doorstep. My wife Jen and I had been scouring eBay for weeks, searching for the perfect piece to complete our new bedroom set. When we stumbled upon this stunning mahogany armoire, it was love at first sight. The intricate carvings of vines and leaves that covered the doors and sides were impeccable, and the iridescent sheen of the wood seemed to give off an ethereal glow in the sunlight that streamed through our bedroom window. This was exactly the type of statement piece we had been envisioning, one that would provide ample storage while complementing the traditional style of our home. We placed our bid without hesitation, and to our delight, won the auction after a suspenseful few days of monitoring it closely. The delivery service arrived right on schedule, two burly men carefully maneuvering the hefty piece into our home. As they stood upright in the corner of our bedroom, aligning it perfectly with the flower-patterned wallpaper, I took a step back to admire its sheer size and impressive craftsmanship. It was even more stunning than it had appeared in the seller's photos, the carvings even more intricate and elegant. Though it took up nearly an entire wall with its width and towering height, it looked as though it was custom built for that very space. Jen was positively delighted, eagerly examining the newly positioned armoire. I could tell she was already envisioning the decorative touches she would add to make it her own. For Jen, It wasn't just a functional storage piece, it was a work of art. She had inherited her love of antiquing from her grandmother, who ran an antique store when Jen was growing up. I always told her she had an eye for curating beautiful, unique vintage finds. After brewing a celebratory pot of tea, we began the process of unpacking and setting out our new treasure. As Jen started carefully transferring our folded clothing into the various small drawers, I volunteered to tackle larger lower cabinets. But she insisted on unpacking it herself, wanting everything to be just right. Jen had a very particular system for organizing closets and dressers, and she shooed me away to give her space to concentrate. I smiled understandingly and headed downstairs to catch up on emails, happy to let her meticulously curate her newest prized possession. About 20 minutes later, I heard Jen call out to me from the bedroom, her tone conveying slight confusion and unease. I quickly climbed the stairs, pushing open the bedroom door to find Jen standing inside the now-open armoire, peering intently at the back wall. She indicated that there seemed to be some kind of hidden compartment and was trying to make out what it contained. My curiosity instantly piqued. I joined her inside the sizable interior, which was bathed in shafts of light from the bedroom windows. Squinting, I could see that the shadowy space appeared to be filled with some type of dried organic material. I leaned in closer, the musty scent of old wood, mothballs, and something else I couldn't quite place surrounding me. Reaching out, I touched what looked to be a small bone fragment and recoiled instantly when I realized it was brittle to the touch. Jen turned to me, her blue eyes wide with dawning understanding and apprehension. It slowly became clear that this was no ordinary antique furniture discovery. The hidden nook was filled with grisly remains. I stumbled backward out of the wardrobe, pulling a shaken Jen along with me. I gulped the fresh air gratefully, but couldn't dispel the cloying foulness that still lingered in my nose and mouth. Jen stood trembling, clasping her hand over her mouth, seeming as repulsed as I felt. We knew we needed to call the police right away. This was a nightmarish find, some kind of sadistic creation hidden away inside the antique wardrobe. What else could possibly explain the horrific secreted contents? And shaking, I retrieved my phone and quickly called the police, all while keeping a wary eye on the large wooden armoire looming nearby. Within 15 harrowing minutes, 2 police officers arrived at our front door. Their grave expressions reflected their understanding of the disturbing situation as we attempted to convey the grisly discovery. Jen was nearly hysterical by then, barely able to communicate in her disoriented state. While attempting to calm her, I relayed the ghastly details to the officers, whose faces paled as I spoke. After a brief discussion, the officers decided to assess the wardrobe themselves and cautiously followed me upstairs to the still-open armoire. Jen refused to step foot in the bedroom again and huddled on the living room sofa, blankets wrapped tightly around her trembling body. The officers spent several tense minutes inside the wardrobe, emerging with solemn yet unnerved expressions. One officer's eyes were watering slightly, evidence of the noxious stench emanating from within. His partner, a veteran on the force, appeared equally rattled. They stated that they had never quite seen something like this before, and that the wardrobe and its contents would need to be confiscated for further analysis. Jen and I silently watched as the antique armoire was carefully maneuvered down the stairs and out the front door, both still in a state of shock. Once it was secured in the police truck and driven away, the house took on an eerie emptiness. We aimlessly wandered the first floor, neither of us willing yet to venture back upstairs to the scene of the horrifying discovery. In the days that followed, Jen and I could barely function, consumed with imagining what sinister secrets the ornate wardrobe still held. We tossed and turned through endless nights filled with grisly dreams of entombed remains. During the day, we jumped at mundane noises, seeing ghastly images at every turn. The sickly sweet stench of decay clung to my nasal passages, permeating my senses constantly. I knew Jen was tormented too by the way she barely ate, rarely spoke in a whisper, and constantly rubbed her arms as if warding off an unseen chill. Nearly 2 weeks after the traumatic find, I received a brief call from the lead detective confirming the human origin of some material found inside the armoire. No further details were offered, but I was assured that forensics teams were exhausting all investigative avenues. Little comfort could be gleaned from such vague updates, and Jen's restless pacing revealed her growing agitation at the lack of answers. In the following weeks, we considered moving out of the tainted house, but finances and inertia kept us paralyzed in place. The bedroom containing the armoire remained firmly shut off with crime scene tape sealing the door, but the image of the wardrobe haunted our thoughts as we attempted to resume normal routines. Ultimately, no suspect was ever named in the disturbing case, and no definitive explanations surfaced about the origin of the hidden contents. As Jen's mental state deteriorated, I knew we couldn't stay in the home another day. We placed the house on the market, and within 2 months had purchased a small condo across town, shedding the cursed dwelling that had shrouded our lives in horror and shadow. Oh no, this can't be happening. I just received an email receipt from eBay for an expensive designer handbag that I definitely did not purchase. As I opened the email on my phone, I felt a pit in my stomach. The order confirmation showed a $1,500 Chanel classic flat bag in black lambskin leather being shipped to an address in a state I've never even visited. How could this happen? I've always been so careful with my eBay account credentials ever since I started using the site over a decade ago. I never reuse passwords and always make sure my login information is encrypted. So how on earth could someone have gained access to my account to place fraudulent orders? I immediately stopped what I was doing and rushed to my laptop to investigate further. Logging into my eBay account, my fears were confirmed. Right there on my purchase history was the order for that expensive Channel bag being shipped clear across the country. The seller had great feedback ratings, but I knew I certainly had not been the one to place that order. As I scrolled down, I also saw several other pricey designer items have been ordered as well over the past few days, all shipping to that same unfamiliar address. My heart was racing as I fully realized what was happening. My eBay account had clearly been hacked. Somewhere along the line, my login credentials had been compromised, allowing a cybercriminal access to my information. Not only could they see my purchase history, but they had access to all of my personal details, saved payment methods, and shipping address. Realizing all the damage they could do, I started to panic. I frantically tried to call eBay customer service to get my account locked down right away. But it was the middle of the night, so after an agonizing 20 minutes navigating through their automated voice prompts, I gave up on reaching a real person. I decided to go ahead and try resetting my password and email address associated with the account myself, hoping that would block the hacker out. However, every time I changed the password, moments later I would get a notification that it had already been reset again by the hacker. They clearly had established some way of maintaining persistent access to my account no matter what I tried. Feeling completely violated knowing some criminal had unfettered access to my private account details, I hardly slept that night. First thing in the morning, I obsessively called eBay back as soon as their customer service lines opened. After almost an hour stuck on hold, I finally reached an agent who could help me. They assured me they would fully investigate the unauthorized charges and suspended my account in the meantime. While I waited to hear back from eBay about their investigation, I started monitoring all of my other financial accounts closely. My eBay account had my PayPal account linked, and sure enough, there were fraudulent charges there as well from various online retailers. Whatever method the hackers were using to access my eBay account seemed to give them entry to PayPal as well. They had already made hundreds of dollars of purchases I never authorized. I changed my PayPal password, but the hacker kept finding ways back in. I reported each charge as fraudulent, but the customer service agents seemed overwhelmed with the sophistication of this attack. After a week, eBay got back to me that they could find no evidence of how my account was compromised. They reversed the fraudulent charges, but with no leads and the hacker still finding ways to get into my PayPal account, I knew I had to take more drastic action. I immediately froze my credit reports to block any new lines of credit from being opened. I also canceled all of my credit cards that may have been linked or compromised. It was time-consuming to update all of my monthly bills and subscriptions, but I knew I had to protect my identity and finances. This was clearly more than just someone trying to order a few expensive handbags on my eBay account. This was likely an organized identity theft ring with expertise in gaining access to consumer accounts. Even after getting new credit cards reissued and changing every single password multiple times, the hackers kept finding ways back into my payment accounts for a few more weeks. They clearly had much of my personal information stored to continue accessing anything tied to my social security number. I truly felt violated and terrified at how powerless I was against such a sophisticated attack. Finally, after almost 2 months of regularly checking my credit reports and account activity, things seemed to quiet down. The constant unauthorized charges ceased. eBay and PayPal declared the investigations officially closed. With the help of credit monitoring services, I was reasonably confident I had all of my accounts secured and the stolen information discarded. However, I will never know for sure exactly what the hackers did with my personal data. My social security number, birth date, addresses, and more could be out there forever, ready to be used against me. I'd never expected that an innocent purchase on eBay could put my entire financial identity and security at risk like that. Now I know I can never be too vigilant in protecting my personal information online. My sense of security has been forever shaken by how quickly my life was turned upside down by that single compromised account. I worry I may never fully recover from the lingering unease of knowing my data is in the hands of criminals. My love for makeup started early in life. As a little girl, I would sneak into my mother's room just to marvel at the colorful tubes and compacts that filled her vanity. I dreamed of the day I could finally play with those shimmering powders and slick lip glosses myself. I can still remember staring wide-eyed at the rows of eyeshadow palettes emblazoned with bold logos, fingering the sleek metallic cases but never daring to pop one open. The fragrances of the perfume bottles lining the table intoxicated me, each one promising adventure and sophistication. Watching my mother expertly apply her makeup was like witnessing magic. With a few careful strokes of a brush, she transformed herself into a glamorous movie star. By my teenage years, I had amassed quite the cosmetics collection of drugstore mascaras and eyeliners. I took pride in carefully applying makeup each morning before school, following tutorials to teach myself techniques to accentuate my features. A swipe of bronzer warmed up and defined my cheekbones. Flicking black liquid liner with a tapered brush let me create bold winged eyes like a pro. I loved how makeup allowed me to enhance my natural features and express my creativity. Each morning was an opportunity to try new color combinations, from moody plums to spring pastels. I felt so put together and confident in my newfound makeup skills. Makeup became my self-care ritual to start the day feeling beautiful inside and out. As I entered my 20s, I yearned to upgrade my cosmetics arsenal with more prestige brands. I set my sights on the famous holy grails constantly touted by beauty influencers. The perfect universally flattering red Chanel lipstick, a silky smooth Dara foundation that made skin look airbrushed, shimmering emerald Pat McGrath eyeshadows boasting intense pigment. The price tags of those luxury cosmetics were far beyond my modest beauty budget. I browsed department store beauty counters wistfully, dazzled by gleaming displays showcasing products I could not afford. Testers let me swatch formulas boasting out-of-this-world pigment and blendability. Standing so close to luxury brands that were just out of reach, it felt unfair that excellent makeup was reserved only for the wealthy. I just wanted the chance to experience the textures and wow factor of designer cosmetics for myself. One evening, deep in my internet rabbit hole, a sponsored ad on Instagram caught my eye. A too-good-to-be-true offer, luxury cosmetics at heavily discounted prices. I tapped the link, which led me to an eBay seller's page brimming with deals almost too unbelievable to trust. Chanel, YSL, La Mer, all my wishlist brands were there at 80% off retail prices. I had heard warnings about counterfeit cosmetics from shady online sellers, but this seller seemed to check out. Their shop boasted thousands of positive reviews, with buyers raving about scoring coveted products for cheap. Reassured, I justified indulging in this discount beauty treasure trove. I eagerly scoured pages of luxe makeup discounted to drugstore prices. Throwing budget cautions aside, I rapidly filled my cart with holy grails. Diamond-encrusted lipsticks, limited edition palettes, creams that claimed to take years off one's face. I felt giddy at the checkout, like I was getting away with robbing a high-end department store. A week later, a large package arrived on my doorstep. Tearing it open, I marveled at the bounty inside, items I never expected to own packed neatly in tissue paper. Sleek compacts and glossy tubes bearing the logos of luxury brands seemed to wink up at me. I rushed to my vanity, grinning as I lined up my discounted haul. With shaking hands, I unboxed each product one by one. The elaborate packaging and enticing scents gave no hint these might be fakes. I glided a rose gold eyeshadow crayon across my lids, marveling at the silicone texture. Immediately, my eyelids seared with burning, stinging pain. My eyes watered badly and I clawed at them, trying to relieve the agonizing sensation. Panicked, I checked the crayon and found no ingredients listed. My pulse raced, realizing the makeup must be counterfeit to fail to display required information. Fearfully, I looked closer at the products I had been so thrilled to receive. The cheap packaging now seemed obviously fake, nothing like the luxe quality of true luxury cosmetics. Despite the frightening reaction, curiosity and desperation got the better of me. I tried one of the lipsticks, hoping not everything could be hazardous fakes. Within minutes, my lips doubled in size, riddled with swollen blisters and cracked flesh. I stared in horror at my distorted face in the mirror. Clearly, these cosmetics were not just imposters. They were toxic. I desperately scrubbed at my blistering skin with makeup wipes, trying in vain to remove the contaminants. The damage intensified rapidly as angry red chemical burns spread across my mouth and eyes. I rushed myself to the emergency room, writhing in pain. Doctors determined the products contained high levels of heavy metals and harsh chemicals totally unsafe for use. They hooked me up to an IV and administered medication to treat the burns and stop the agonizing reaction. I was cautioned it would take many slow, painful weeks for the chemical wounds to properly heal. Over the endless doctor visits, I sobbed in frustration at my own foolishness. How could I have fallen for such an obvious scam that left me scarred? Once I recovered enough, I made it my mission to bring the eBay seller to justice. I tracked down the seller's address and immediately reported them for trafficking prohibited and hazardous materials. After a full investigation of the suspicious account, authorities raided the counterfeit cosmetics operation. It was an illicit factory mass-producing unsafe fakes made with illegal levels of industrial toxins and lab chemicals. The criminal mastermind behind the listings was arrested. Thanks to testimony from me and a few other victims, the seller was charged and successfully prosecuted for running an illegal business peddling dangerous products. I joined a class action lawsuit against the seller and eventually received some compensation for my trauma. With the seller's toxic operation shut down for good, I found some relief knowing nobody else would fall prey to their hazardous fakes. But I still suffered from lingering anxiety over what long-term effects the chemicals could have on my body after exposure. My terrifying experience taught me to be far warier of deals that seem too good to be true online. No luxury cosmetic is worth saving a few bucks if it will burn or blind you. I now share my story to warn fellow beauty lovers away from shady sellers hawking fakes. We must band together to report suspicious listings and keep our communities safe. Though I still bear scars from this horror I survived, but not everyone would be so lucky. Let's unite and take a stand to shut down hazardous counterfeiters and champion authentic, ethical beauty. I learned the hard way that the high costs of prestige makeup reflect years of research, innovation, and care. Our skins are too precious to risk over bargains that can maim or poison us. I was trying to declutter and make some extra money by listing a couple of my old gadgets that I no longer used. The first few transactions went smoothly. I shipped out the items quickly and appreciated the positive feedback I received from the buyers. But I had no idea that accepting that one fateful order in early April would turn my life upside down. The buyer, who went by the username Sweetsily123, purchased an old digital camera from me. It was a fairly basic exchange. She paid via PayPal. I packaged up the camera and mailed it out the next day. A week later, she left glowing feedback, raving about how it was the perfect seller and how impressed she was with the fast shipping and the camera's condition. I thought nothing of it at the time. I was just pleased I could make one of my eBay customers happy with their purchase. But then the messages started coming in. At first, just short, perky notes thanking me again for the great transaction. But over the next few days, they became more frequent, and the tone started to shift. Sweetsily123 began asking me increasingly personal questions. What were my hobbies? What did I do for work? Was I married? Did I have kids? Still, I tried to be polite and gave cursory responses about my job and interests, letting her know I preferred to keep my private life private. I didn't want to upset a customer over what I hoped was just friendly chatter. Soon, though, the messages started coming daily, then multiple times a day. Sweetsily123 said she felt a deep connection to me, and like we were meant to be close. She suggested that maybe she should plan a trip to come visit me so we could get to know each other better. Laughing emojis accompanied her messages, but I started to seriously worry. Who was this woman who was suddenly acting like we were long-lost friends? I was simply a stranger who had sold her a used camera, barely even a blip in her life. But to her, I somehow represented something much more. I stopped responding altogether, hoping that would be the end of the one-sided conversation. But over the next couple weeks, the messages kept coming at all hours of the day and night. Sweetsily123 declared her undying love for me and described all the ways she wanted to show her affection. She said she understood me in a way no one else could. I was her soulmate, and soon we'd be together forever. I was beyond unsettled and officially freaked out. This complete stranger had fixated on me for some unknown reason. I blocked Sweet Silly 123 on eBay and reported her to customer service. But that didn't stop her. She created new accounts to continue contacting me. She even found my personal email address and sent me messages there, which described her elaborate fantasies about our future life together. The house we would share, the vacations we would take, the children we would have. That's when I started noticing strange occurrences around my home. Unfamiliar vehicles parked down the block. Flower deliveries I didn't order left on my doorstep. Gifts and letters addressed to me arriving in the mail, all from unknown senders. I couldn't prove she was responsible, but in my gut, I knew Sweet Silly 123 was escalating beyond the online messages. One evening in early May, as I was washing dishes, I looked out my kitchen window and noticed a figure ducking behind a tree in my backyard. Heart pounding, I ran outside to confront the trespasser, but they were gone. Still, I knew Sweet Silly 123 had been here, ran on my property, watching me through the window. I informed the police and showed them samples of the relentless messages, let them know about the packages and my spotting someone on my property. They agreed to drive by my house periodically to check for suspicious activity, but Sweet Silly 123 only became more emboldened. I'd arrive home from work to find my gate open or the front door unlocked. She left signs of her presence everywhere. A lipstick kiss mark on my bathroom mirror, photos of me she had developed and printed out laying on my bed, my shoes lined up neatly by the door. She wanted me to know she had been inside my most private spaces. Her unhinged messages now declared it was useless to resist. She would make me love her back no matter what. She knew my routines, my coworkers' names, my favorite restaurants. I was terrified, but the police said that until she directly threatened me, their hands were tied. I begged them to help me get a restraining order. Late one night in mid-June, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I heard a creak downstairs. Blood turning to ice, I crept down the stairs, baseball bat in hand, to confront the intruder. But by the time I reached the foyer, she was gone. The front door hung open, swaying in the cold night breeze. I snapped. At that point, I was willing to go to any lengths to reclaim my life and home from this stalker. I installed an intricate security system, complete with cameras. I got a large guard dog who would alert me to any presence on the property. I took self-defense classes to prepare in case it came to that. And I continued relentlessly pressing the police to step in. As summer dragged on, I cannot say for sure whether Sweet Silly 123 will ever truly be out of my life for good. The barricades and protection help me sleep better at night, but I still occasionally catch sight of a familiar vehicle lingering nearby or find strange packages left for me. All because of one seemingly simple eBay transaction in the spring that morphed into an unrelenting nightmare. I fear I may never feel totally safe again thanks to her fixation, but I refuse to let her control me any longer. It started out as just another Tuesday. I was sitting at my desk at the office, half-heartedly picking at the lackluster salad I packed for lunch. With a bored sigh, I opened up my laptop and absent-mindedly clicked on the eBay bookmark. Mindless online shopping had become a bit of a midday ritual for me. It was a way to escape the monotonous drag of my corporate job, if only for a few minutes. As the familiar eBay homepage loaded, I clicked over to the health and wellness section. Money had been tight lately between my student loan payments and credit card bills, so I taken to scoping out discounts on vitamins and supplements. It was my little secret strategy to stay healthy on a budget. I scanned the listings with disinterest, not expecting to find anything exciting. Then an ad in bright, bold letters caught my eye. 100% all-natural sleep aid. Fall asleep instantly and wake up refreshed. I felt a spark of interest as I clicked on the listing. The seller seemed legitimate with lots of positive reviews. Customers raved about how this sleep aid had improved their quality of sleep. One woman said she struggled with insomnia for years and had finally found a natural solution. Someone else called it a miracle in a bottle that had cured his lifelong inability to sleep through the night. The reviews were convincing, though what really hooked me was the price. For a month's supply of 60 pills, it cost only $19.95 with free shipping. Most natural sleep aids I'd seen were at least double that amount. I hesitated for just a moment, wondering if it was too good to be true. But the seller had a 99% positive rating across thousands of reviews. I convinced myself there was no way these could be dangerous if so many people had great results. I hit buy now and waiting eagerly for my bargain sleep aid to arrive. 2 days later, a package was waiting when I got home from work. In my excitement, I didn't even think to open it right away. I had a quick dinner, watched some Netflix, and finally swallowed one of the small white pills before bed as directed. I could hardly wait to wake up feeling energized and refreshed for the first time in years. The next morning, I jerked awake in a panic and fumbled to turn off the blaring alarms. Had I really slept through all 5 of my alarms? A glance at the clock confirmed my worst fear. Somehow I had slept for 15 hours straight, making me painfully late for work. Still groggy, I scrambled to get ready as fast as I possibly could. I made it to the office over 2 hours past my start time, earning me a stern lecture from my boss. Driving through the day, I felt sluggish and unable to focus. My mind kept drifting, eyes feeling heavy and dry. I assumed my body just needed an adjustment period after getting such an unusually deep, long night of sleep thanks to the pills. So after another quick dinner in front of the TV, I swallowed a second pill and drifted off again. The next day was even worse after I again slept for an alarming 15 hours straight. I shuffled around in a mental fog, spilling coffee on my desk and nodding off during conference calls. This time my boss threatened to put me on probation if I showed up super late again. Panicked and exhausted, I knew something was very wrong. Despite my desperation for restful sleep, I was scared to take another pill. I had to figure out what was going on. Afraid I was becoming dependent or addicted, I stopped taking the sleep aid altogether. The next 2 nights I barely slept, instead lying awake staring into the darkness. After the restless weekend, I decided to try the pills again on Monday night at a lower dose. My hopes of feeling normal were quickly shattered. I experienced strange visions drifting into nightmares, soaked in sweat. At 2 a.m. I jolted awake with my heart palpitating and an intense sense of dread. I became convinced someone had broken in, that I was in terrible danger. I paced around checking doors and windows repeatedly, pulse racing. When the sun finally rose, the feelings of paranoia and anxiety faded. But I was left totally shaken and exhausted after another night of low rest. I knew then something was very wrong with these sleep pills. They were anything but natural. Terrified but needing answers, I made myself go to the doctor and explain what had been happening. She frowned with concern and ordered some blood work. When the results came back, she informed me traces of a powerful synthetic stimulant had shown up in my blood, a substance with effects similar to amphetamines. My hands trembled as I forced myself to open a case on eBay and provide the test results. I felt such fury to think a seller had secretly been slipping an illegal and dangerous drug into what they claimed was a natural supplement. Everything about their listing had been lies and deception. Who knew what other substances had been in those little white pills that wreaked such havoc on my mind and body? I waited anxiously for eBay to respond, hardly able to eat or concentrate at work. Visions of the pills I had unknowingly swallowed haunted me. I became obsessed, compulsively researching the dangers of experimental stimulants. I learned these drugs could potentially cause permanent brain damage, trigger psychosis, or even kill someone if they overdosed. What if I'd mistakenly taken the sleep pills before driving or operating heavy machinery? Would I even be alive? The lack of response from eBay as days turned into weeks filled me with outrage. Meanwhile, ads from the shady seller kept popping up in my inbox, hawking other miracle supplements at crazy low prices. How many other unsuspecting buyers were being reeled in and put in harm's way? Something had to be done to stop them. I decided to take action on my own. Digging through the seller's feedback and shipping details, I figured out the county they seemed to be based in. I reached out to the local police department there, who were happy to work with me once I explained the situation. Together, we successfully tracked down the seller and had their remaining inventory seized and tested. Just as I expected, the pills all contained illegal and dangerous synthetic stimulants, falsely marketed as natural ingredients. The police acted swiftly, arresting the sellers and shutting down their entire eBay drug ring. I was informed some customers had been hospitalized after taking their products. Others had developed intense addictions and were forced into rehab programs. While I had escaped with only some panic attacks and disrupted sleep, the effects lingered in my mind. I became hyper-vigilant about researching any supplement before purchasing. I learned to be much more cautious about deals that seem too good to be true when it comes to my health. Because no dollar amount is worth risking your safety and sanity, as I learned the hard way through my terrifying eBay horror story. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.